Margaret Sullavan was a golden age icon with a shocking secret. She was born with an ear condition that caused her to gradually become deaf over the course of her life. She hid this deafness from the people in her life, and it's possible she was trying to hide it from herself. Her worsening deafness only exacerbated other worsening issues during her later life, which included depression and a messy divorce. Join Facts First as we explore how Margaret Sullavan lived in fear of her deafness and then met a tragic end. Margaret Sullavan had a lonely childhood. Margaret Sullavan was born into a wealthy family in May of 1909. Her father was a stockbroker, but the young girl's childhood was anything but the fairy tale you might imagine. For years, she was essentially bedridden as a result of muscular weakness. This dealt a significant blow to her social life, as she spent these years only with herself as company. Thankfully, this resulted in Margaret developing her mind in ways she might not have otherwise. She became strong-willed and certainly grew to have quite the imagination. She eventually recovered from this muscle weakness, though there was another problem that ended up affecting her even more. As it turns out, Margaret was born with an ear condition that made it so she started growing deaf at a young age. This worsened until Margaret spent the remainder of her years not being able to hear at all. The deafness might have been manageable if it weren't for Margaret's tragic reaction to it. For whatever reason, the actress refused to come to terms with her deafness until her dying days, choosing instead to live in denial. The depression that was caused trying to hide her true nature resulted in the actress's life ending much sooner than it needed to, and by her own hands. Margaret's deafness didn't come to truly affect her until much later, after she had already attained stardom. Following her recovery from the muscular condition that saw her bedridden, she blossomed into a bright and successful young adult. She became president of the student body at the Chatham Episcopal Institute, which is where she first developed dreams of becoming a stage actress. Following graduation, she moved to Boston and began studying acting and dancing while earning a living as a clerk in a bookstore. Her parents didn't support her on her quest to become an actress, so they refused to share their wealth when their daughter told them. Margaret headed straight for the stage. In the late 1920s, Margaret Sullavan began performing on stage with the Harvard University Players. She performed with the troupe for a summer season, during which time she met future husband and film star Henry Fonda. At that time, Henry was just trying to make a name for himself as a performer. The two had quite a bit in common and ended up tying the knot and divorcing well before either of them achieved Hollywood stardom. They married in 1931 and were divorced by 33. Margaret went on to remarry 3 times, and Henry Fonda wasn't the only one of her husbands who was a notable figure. After a few years of performing in lesser productions, Margaret finally debuted on Broadway with 1931's A Modern Virgin. More Broadway roles followed the successful turn, including a role that saw Margaret working alongside a similarly young Humphrey Bogart. As Margaret's profile on the stage increased, she started getting attention from Hollywood producers. Before we tell you more, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Margaret was always strong-willed. Margaret Sullavan was always incredibly strong-willed, and she wasn't one to be had by the Hollywood studio system. When Hollywood bigwigs came to Broadway trying to get a taste of New York's newest star, the actress knew she had some leverage. She turned down a few offers before finally making a deal with Universal Pictures that would allow her to continue acting on stage. She signed a 3-year deal, and she made sure to exercise special care when picking out scripts, which was a luxury most other stars were never afforded. But Margaret ended up being rather unhappy with how her debut performance turned out. As a matter of fact, she was so unhappy upon seeing footage of herself in her first film, she tried to buy both the film and her own contract out from Universal Pictures so she could have the footage destroyed. It's not quite clear what Margaret saw in her performance that caused such a reaction, but the public felt differently. Margaret's first role was in the 1933 film Only Yesterday, and the film was a hit. Audiences loved Margaret, and Universal Pictures ended up being very glad they signed her on. Margaret came to terms with the fact that audiences liked her more than she liked herself, and she relented and continued filming movies with Universal. She was always her own harshest critic, and her hypersensitivity when it came to her image is likely a huge part of what made her hide her deafness. Following Margaret's breakout performance in Only Yesterday, she caught another big film role in 1935's The Good Fairy. Legendary filmmaker William Wyler directed it, and he became smitten with his leading lady during production. Was Margaret in love with James Stewart? Margaret and William soon fell in love, and William became her second husband. Sadly, their marriage was just as short as her first one. They married in 1934 and divorced in 1936. Some have suggested that the marriage ended because Margaret fell in love with James Stewart. Margaret began appearing in films with James during the mid-1930s, and she's widely credited with helping the future celebrity become a star. Despite this, Margaret remained adamant until her dying day that she and James were nothing more than good friends. Some of the many pictures they starred in together included Next Time We Love and The Shop Around the Corner. Margaret fought for James to get the opportunity to screen test to be her on-screen partner in their first film together, and she coached him to be a better actor. She continued finding success in Hollywood over the course of the 1930s, and even garnered an Academy Award nomination for her performance in the film Three Comrades. However, after a pair of features in the early 1940s, Margaret decided she wanted to return to the stage. She only ever performed in one more film after that, though that film was a major success. She also continued receiving great acclaim thanks to her stage performances. She simply liked working on stage better than she did within the Hollywood system. Either that or the loudness of Broadway fit better with her worsening deafness. Her final film performance was in 1950 when she gave a critically acclaimed turn as a cancer patient in the film No Sad Songs for Me. Her performance was so well received, she continued receiving lucrative offers for film roles up until her dying days, but she always turned them down. It's unclear how much of Margaret's erratic behavior was caused by her personal troubles. Margaret's miserable marriage and last days. In addition to her worsening deafness, she also suffered a miserable third marriage. It was to a man named Leland Hayward, who was previously her agent. The marriage lasted over a decade and yielded 3 children, but it was not a happy one. It ended when she caught him cheating. Following their divorce in 1949, Margaret's kids decided to live with their father instead of her. This emotionally affected her a great deal and worsened her already deteriorating mental state. She suffered a breakdown in 1955, after which she was voluntarily committed for a period of time. She married a man named Kenneth Wagg in 1950, and he remained by her side until her death. Kenneth helped Margaret through the worst years of her life, but apparently it wasn't enough. In 1960, she committed suicide via sleeping pill overdose. 2 of her 3 children followed suit, marking an end to one of the most tragic stories in all of show business. Now it's time to hear from you. What's your favorite memory of Margaret Sullavan? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.